Well, you had talked about the noble Russian suffering. There's a name for it, Trikta or
Right.
something like.
That's something that I've been just thinking for a long time, and I can't. Maybe this is an opportunity for me to try to articulate this.
Please, I'm interested in this because and as you just described your childhood, looking around and not being, um, uh, having kind of a dark kind of view of things and not being motivated by any of it or whatever. I'm wondering how much of that is personal and how much of that is cultural. And so
Right.
you brought up in the email that you sent me the notion of the noble Russian sadness, and I'd like to hear more about that.
Right. This is so. There's a word, Toska, in Russian that is not really translatable into English. There's a beautiful quote which I will not be able to bring up right now from Vladimir Nabokov, who tried
Hmm.
to describe the word. It's like
Yeah.
his attempt at articulation it, and he did a great job. And what he did is he said that it has different shades of meaning, but they are all united in this one word. And on the most kind of mundane level, it's boredom. It's just, you sit at home and you have nothing to do, and it's that. And at the most kind of the loftiest level, it is an existential kind of sadness or angst, a sadness without a purpose and object,
Yeah.
that feels kind of universal and feels like a quality of existence self, and it has all
Right.
these other shades of meaning. And it's kind of like I have an idea that I've been thinking about for a couple of years at least, that I haven't been able to approach or express properly, that is connected to that word and connected to that idea of languages being different, and
Yeah.
that having some sort of a meaning. And that came from I did a couple of conversations with on this show with George Yan, who wrote a book about Russian cosmists, which are it's like a peculiar train of thought in Russian philosophy.
Hmm.
And I was preparing for those conversations, going through his book, and he would describe the thinking of these people. It's a book written in English, and he every now and again he would put next to the English translation of some key concept, he would put the Russian words in italics, in English, in transliterated. And I had such a weird feeling looking at that, like seeing a word that to me is completely familiar. There is nothing strange or special or confusing about it. And suddenly it is in this new environment surrounded by all of these foreign words, and it's written, it becomes longer when you write it down in English because some sounds are difficult to transcribe.
Right. Yeah.
And I almost felt, I felt something for the word itself. Like, look at you, you're in a different environment. How are you going to fare in this environment?
Yeah. Right.
And I felt kind of happy for those words.
Right.
And so after reading that, there was a thought that stuck with me of, I wonder if I can do that for some other words that I love in my language that are important for me, for my experience of life. And a bunch of concepts were kind of rattling around in my head, and one of those is this toska, this sadness that is so fundamental, I feel, to the Russian experience. Like, it's one of those words when, like, if you are, say you're with somebody and you're experiencing this kind of sadness, and there's like a silence, and then one of the people says that word toska. Just saying that word makes the experience like it is such a perfect articulation of this particular important feeling that once that word is said, it almost alleviates this feeling to some extent, because you named it. And it's such a recognizable thing, and such a it's when I speak about it right now, I'm trying to describe this thing, and it's so difficult, so slippery. But for a Russian, this concept is something that everybody knows, and everybody knows exactly what you're talking about.
Wow.
Because everybody has felt it. Right, and it's probably something that we all feel. Probably Americans have that feeling too, the experience, but not a name for it.
One of the things that occurred to me while you were speaking was that to be able to say it and articulate it and have somebody else understand that.
That's right.
There's an old saying: a grief shared is half a grief, and a joy is twice a joy. So to be able to share that with somebody and to have somebody else say, I know exactly what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what you mean. It makes me feel completely less alone in the world, like somebody really gets me. So, where there's a connection at a pre-verbal level almost, soul level with that person. Then if somebody is able to understand my angst and my ennui, I don't know if you're familiar with that English word ennui, which seems to articulate the same thing, ennui, I believe it's spelled. But at any rate, it is exactly, I think, what it is that you're talking about.
In that quote from Nabokov, he uses that word, and I always went over that word thinking this is some weird thing that's probably from French or something.
Look it up. You'll enjoy it. It seems to articulate exactly the same thing. But at the same time, I mean, Buddhists would call that dukkha.
Right.
And Jesus would have said, we all fall short of the glory of God. We're all sinners. And so there's this dissatisfaction. There's this feeling of something is just quite not right, But then I've also heard this old Christian bromide, this old saying that says suffering is the first grace. That feeling, those feelings of ennui, or whatever the Russian word was that you said that described this, is the impetus for us to try and understand what this is all about. And that's the thing that sets our feet upon the path, of the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell called it, or whatever, just the spiritual path and makes us want to understand the universe, because if you're contented and everything is lovely and everything, you're not going to wonder at the mystery of the universe, I don't think, as much as if you are unhappy and you just don't go and jump off the bridge because you're so unhappy, which is also a possibility,
Yeah.
to be or not to be. But if you use it in the right way, then it can lead you, hopefully, and this is the promise, can lead you beyond suffering into the act of love itself. And, and again, I think that's what we're all after.
Yeah, you mentioned dukkha, and that is the angle that I'm trying to. I said that there's an idea that's connected to this word for me, almost a creative project that never takes off, and it's that I felt, I was thinking about these words. What can I do for these Russian words that I love?
Yeah.
And when I thought about this word Toska, I thought, man, you can build a religion out of this. You can build a cosmology out of this, because it is such a fundamental thing. And I was thinking about the Buddhist approach to this, and I was comparing dukkha and Toska, and I felt like my word, I liked it better, because and I'm probably misunderstanding something about the Buddhist philosophy, but the thing that Toska has that dukkha doesn't seem to is that my understanding is in Buddhism, dukkha, this suffering or unsatisfactoriness, comes from craving. There's a causal link there between craving or aversion, and then the resulting thing is this suffering. Now, the beautiful thing about Toska is it can be also a verb, and you can experience this Toska for somebody or something. For the Russian, there is a body of literature about experiencing that for your homeland, because of all these generations of people who ended up living in the exile, or had to immigrate because of the Soviet Union or something.
Yeah.
Or you can experience it towards a person. If you're separated with your lover, you're feeling that.
Right.
But it is also something that you can experience with no object and no destination. It's just this weird universal kind of feeling.
There is the gravity, though, of the ennui, or the gravity of the depression that seems like to have a stranglehold on me sometimes. I mean, there are many different ways in which I'm called and that I can participate to make it a creative universe. But there are those days when I am just when the darkness is upon me that I don't want to do any of them. That nothing calls to me, and of all the things that I could do and all the creative endeavors I could participate in, none is going to be satisfactory. It's going to be in that middle place that you were talking about, of going one way or the other. And so I think, I don't know if there is an answer, but it would seem to me that and I'm just wondering if being passively aware is to participate, even though it seems like we're not. There are periods of fecundity, when everything is rich and you're producing all that. And then there are the ebbing times when you're not producing and not so engaged in all of that. And, it's one of those cyclic things, just like all life is full of cycles. This may just be one of the cyclic things that we have to just allow that to come back into the periods of fruition again. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, that would be in my blueprint of a religion or cosmology based on that notion of Toska. That would be the practical dimension of it. As I said, Toska can be a longing for something, or it can be a longing without an object. And one way to look at this longing, the universal longing, is, let's say, it's a longing of an idea to be expressed, or of matter to be inspirited, right? It might be a kind of a if we take a love metaphor, the spirit and matter, let's say, are in love and separated, and they're missing each other and longing each other. Yeah. Or all of these, you pick any dichotomy you want to use, and then if we take that approach, then when that is happening, when this longing is happening, well, you don't get distracted from it. Just let it be, because that's love. Yeah, that's part of it. Right. That's missing somebody you love is part of love. That's not something to. It's not like you want in a loving relationship, you want just the beautiful happy parts when you're watching Netflix on a couch. Right. You also want to ignore, to dismiss, to not be willing to experience the heartache of love is to diminish the feeling. And so I agree with you there. If you are experiencing this sadness, then just experience the sadness. It's part of the thing. And in my experience, that is practically the right approach. If you don't get distracted and you face and let the sadness be there with you and sit with it and kind of make friends with it, then well, it only the only thing that can follow boredom is lack of boredom. The only something comes out of it. It's you sit, if you're not compelled with reality and you don't distract yourself with YouTube or drugs or something else, you will a moment will come when something comes out of you or comes towards you that will make this reality more compelling, and that's that ebb and flow that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, and we live in the dualistic universe, so that's the way it's going to be. And look at the Taoist symbol, the yin and yang symbol, contained in all things as the seeds of their opposite. Right. And so if you want happiness, start with sorrow in a sense, and just allow that to be as it is. Or, and as Shakespeare said, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And Eckhart Tolle talks about this too, in that if you don't add a story to your experience, then it's just an experience.
Right.
In other words, suffering requires time. Pain occurs in the present moment, but suffering requires time. You have to invent a story about the future or the past that goes along with your pain. And that's the thing that gives it's that heavy substance, that we're trying to escape from. Whereas if we are just able to not add a story to our pain, but just experience the sensations of the pain itself, it tends then to dissipate and to move on to something else.
Or change.
And again, yeah, exactly. And change is the only, constant in the universe, as Heraclitus said. And good fucking luck.
Yep.
Totally. But to find fellow travelers along the way, like yourself, knowing that you're out there is great balm for my soul. And we would hope to find that in a primary relationship too, that we are with someone who understands what it feels like to, to be deeply sorrowful, or that's what empathy is all about. For God's sakes, is the ability to be empathetic. To I know how it is that you feel, and in that there is a connection and an intimacy then that engenders love. And compassion and caring and closeness and embracing and all of those wonderful things.
Yeah.
So, and the Russian noble sadness. Are you familiar with the term homesickness? To be homesick?
Sure. Yeah.
It's like to miss your family or whatever like that. Yeah. Can you liken that to homesickness? Is that like, does that feel like that too?
I'd say it's similar. Yeah. This in my various attempts to approach the subject, one of the kind of metaphors that I came up with is, again, if we use this dichotomy between matter and spirit and look at what we are children of these both worlds. If we do imagine two worlds, the Platonic world of ideas, where it's just, I'm not actually that versed in Platonic thought, but I kind of conflate the world of ideas and, let's say, pure consciousness.
Yeah.
And then the world of matter, if we envision it as devoid of life experience and spirit, then we are in between. We are children of an angel and an ape. We are both material and spiritual, and so we have these two homes, and we are in neither of them. And so homesickness is one of the ways to approach this. We are missing the home that we have never really knew.
And therein lies the longing that you were talking about.
That's right.
And if you listen to the older gospel music with all those beautiful chord changes in the piano, there is such, and I'm trying to tell my domestic partner all the time about this, about that sense of longing that is in that music. It's just there's and there's so much of it out there, but it is all filled with exactly that. It's like a homesickness, but therein lies much of the source of art and music and literature. Is all of that, is this human conundrum of being away from home, is to be separated, is to have that sense of longing. So it does serve this beautiful purpose. And you alluded to that earlier in a comment that you made, and I can't remember what it was now, but at any rate, that there is something very savory in that. It's bittersweet. It is bittersweet, It's both attractive and repulsive at the same time, and it's incredibly complex and flavorful in that. In just the, it's just the. it's the incredible majesty and mystery of being a human being falling through infinite space on an insignificant speck of dust, but to and that's why I was talking earlier in our earlier conversation about, I think that Russians, my impression of Russians is that they feel so much deeper and so much more, and they're so much more in touch with just the organic nature of being alive and being a human being and the human experience and all of that, where Americans to me are somewhat more superficial, and that's, there are exceptions, of course,
Right.
to all of that, but nevertheless, I think that Europeans and Russians probably in particular are deeper into that and deeper into that bittersweet quality of being
Russians,
alive.
I will accept that Russians have a rich experience with different flavors of suffering, and that's a territory that our let's say collective psyche has studied extensively.
Yeah.